don't think it'll be exploration just for the sake of exploration. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And your boy's making models out of balsa wood. You're not in control of anything. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film First Man.
Give me the first man, right? Like no other...
What do you mean?
Like no first woman. Could we have a first woman?
Why not?
And redo this whole thing. Come on, people.
Yeah. Where was that going?
I don't know. I lost the train halfway.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I'm fully derailed. Should we talk about something else?
Sure, why not? Hey, this is an exciting one because I just want to say off the bat, this is a movie to go see in IMAX, but that was not your experience, right?
I mean, I didn't see it in IMAX, no.
Would you have wanted to see it in IMAX now having seen it?
Sure.
Right.
It wasn't shot in IMAX, was it?
It was.
Oh.
There were portions of the film shot in IMAX.
I'll go see any movie that's shot in IMAX
Right.
IMAX. But there was nothing. Look, when we'll get into it, I thought it looked stunning. But I don't know. You know what? You know what's interesting about it? So much of it is claustrophobic.
Yeah.
That isn't something I would instantly think IMAX.
You, I think, have missed out on a unique part of this film that takes place in. It's a specific sequence that takes place in IMAX. So
is it the moon?
It might very well be, but we will talk about that as we get into the podcast. This is Damien Chazelle's First Man, a film that I've been excited to see because our favorite director of La La Land and Whiplash is at the helm.
He's in the driver's seat of Apollo 11 and all the ones before it.
Yeah, exactly. And just a couple of things to note that really depressed me this week is how old do you think Neil Armstrong was when he walked on the moon?
I don't know.
38.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He was 38 years old. I find that incredibly depressing from the point of view of like the dude was a father of three, engineer, accomplished space pilot, and the first man to walk on the moon at the age of 38.
But you know what? Look, I don't like comparing myself to other people that did like amazing things by a specific age or had like life goals because guess what? You know what they didn't have? 185 episodes of a movie discussion podcast in the bank. Neil Armstrong did amazing things, but he didn't do that, Shahir.
That is depressing. Okay, moving on. Also, the fact that Damien Chazelle is 33 years old makes this all the more fun for us oldies in the room.
Just enjoy life, Shahir. Stop. You don't have to feel bad about your candle.
Oh no, I don't feel bad. I just feel worthless. If that's a difference. Is that
no, that's pretty bad.
No.
That's like an exacerbation of bad.
No, I don't feel bad. Like, I'm happy lounging around in my pajamas playing video games.
Sure.
I'm just saying I've realized the some parts of my life are not very valuable to society as a whole. So that's slightly different. Like, I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm just, worthless.
You are a complex, intricate series of neuroses, my friend.
That is true. And we have a couple of emails this week that I wanted to touch on just to cover off some topics. First one will be about our review of, believe it or not, Popstar. And
what?
And our other review of The Nice Guys. We have a new listener by the name of Simon. I won't say your last name. Relatively new listener. I've been going through your old reviews tonight. I listened to The Nice Guys and Popstar.
Wow.
When you talked about Nice Guys, I kept thinking of how you needed to talk about Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Yeah.
But you had little interest in that and might have eased you into The Nice Guys. As a huge fan of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, I have to say that you need emphasis on the need to see this. It didn't ease me into Nice Guys per se. I enjoyed Nice Guys, but Kiss Kiss Bang Bang makes Nice Guys feel like a weak sequel. Please watch Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. It's so good. We are reinstituting our request policy soon. Probably, I'll be honest with you, it'd probably be done by 2019 at this point.
Yes.
Because we still have one big batch of reviews that we need to finish off.
Cornetto Trilogy.
But once that's done, we will restate the request policy, in which case, Simon, you will be able to request us Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is a movie I really want to see.
Yes,
I just haven't gotten around to it.
Side note, it sounds like from that he didn't think that we enjoyed Nice Guys.
Yeah.
But I remember enjoying Nice Guys, but now I feel like I should go back and listen to the podcast, because in my head, this is strange, I feel like I was positive about Nice Guys. There were some
I
problems.
think you were more positive on it than I was.
Okay, maybe he's just I don't know. I need to go back and listen. We've done a lot of these.
Yeah. Also, I feel like you kind of messed up on Popstar when talking about the song Finest Girl, calling it the Fuck Bin Laden song when I don't think you really touched on how fun that song is, being such an inappropriate love song. Also, I do own the album. I love to play in the car. I think Simon is messing up on our interpretation because I remember loving
Popstar I really dug.
Loving that song. And it also ended up on my top 10 of that year. So,
and I listened to that soundtrack quite a bit. I think, maybe we got the name of the song wrong.
Yeah, I think we definitely probably got
Apologies for that.
We will get names wrong all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Steven.
Buckle up, Timothy. No,
Yeah.
Thank you, Simon, for writing in. Keep calling us out on our shit because... Well, I mean, as we illustrated by the beginning of this podcast and the very strange sadness that Shahir brought on board,
It's not sadness. You're misinterpreting it. It's not
Okay,
sadness.
I'm
It's
sorry.
worthlessness.
No, isn't that sad?
No, it's not. It's a distinction. There's a clear distinction between you can feel worthless but not feel sad.
But you can feel worthless but happy?
Yeah. I think, the best example of that is Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo gang. He's worthless, but he's happy.
But he doesn't feel worthless.
He's fine. He's just fine. I'm sure deep down there's this, he's just...
I don't think so. I think he's, from how Shaggy is presented, he seems pretty A-okay.
I'm wondering who's a worthless character.
Like Zoink Scoob.
Good
one, Raggy.
But who doesn't feel sad about their lives. I'm thinking of Brad Pitt in True Romance for some reason.
Okay.
That's the one I got. Anyway, moving on. Zach, who has emailed us in before, writes in about
Zach.
his review, about First Man, which will lead us directly into that review.
Sweet.
Just watched First Man. So good. The way it was shot, the acting, and just in general, a top movie. Whilst watching it, it felt at times that the final Apollo mission might not work, which is crazy, right? Of course they make it. Got me thinking about, from a filmmaker's point of view, how do you create suspense when everyone in the audience knows the outcome? Because that's why I don't like prequels. As an example, Solo. I know Han Solo lives, so I don't care about any of the action scenes. Look forward to your guys' replies, Zach. This is going to be an interesting lead-up question into our podcast. Please, if you want to write us more interesting questions like that, please to Zach and Simon, or is it Steven? I don't know. Write us in at, leave us a review on iTunes, please. That really does help out our cause. I believe Zach's already done that, but Simon, you're letting the team down.
You're just ragging on Simon.
Oh, man.
Simon was kind enough to write in and correct us on our bullshit.
Nah, I don't care. But if you, and also leave us an email like Zach and Simon did at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter with your shorter messages at onlymoviepod.
We do the Twitter machine.
Do we?
I do.
Okay.
I rock that thing like a motherfucker.
All right, but this is a really good question, actually, which is that we all know how the Apollo missions ended up. We all know that Neil
Do we, Shahir? Like, did we really, actually go to the moon,
This
Shahir?
is not a review of Capricorn 13.
Because
Capricorn
like,
1,
the
what am I
technology
talking
back then, okay, so, 2001 came out the same year that the moon landing happened.
It actually came out the year before.
Don't throw me
Came
your
out the year
alternative facts, Shahir.
No,
So
the alternative fact is that Stanley Kubrick was the
angles-
guy who faked the moon landing.
The angles, man, the light doesn't reflect or whatever. And yeah, I said reflect.
Reflect. Have you ever seen the press interviews for Gravity? Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity.
I think back in the day.
There's a person who legitimately, a journalist, mind you, a person who has received their press credentials and is gainfully employed by a magazine, who gets up in front of him and says, "So what was it like filming in space? Like, how did the crew react to going up to space and filming there?" And Alfonso Cuarón and the rest of the team kind of look around at each other and go, "Wait, I mean, we're flattered, but
They should have just been like, it was great.
It was great. It was the best feeling I've ever.
How do you? I want to rewind a little bit because I was just making fun of moon truthers.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that whole conspiracy theory?
I got to be honest with you. I've never given it more than half a second's thought.
Have you ever gotten into a discussion, or I'll call it just a screaming match in my own mind when talking to someone who doesn't believe we landed on the moon?
I've never talked to someone who doesn't believe.
Holy shit! Well, first of all, I bet you have, and they just never brought it up.
Probably never come up.
But thank God you haven't, because it's one of the most infuriating things. I don't get mad about what would be considered trivial in my own life, things like that very much, unless you start talking about movies. So it's movies and the moon landing, the two things that if you're like, oh, that something's not whatever, it's terrifying and weird, and it makes me it made me sad for humanity well before the last 2 years. It's weird. It's so strange.
There is a great clip on YouTube of a moon truther, as you call it,
Yep.
approaching Buzz Aldrin and asking him about why he faked the moon landing, and Buzz Aldrin proceeds to punch him in the face.
Yes, I have seen that,
And
and that's how you do it.
And that's how you do it. No, we're not advocating for anyone to punch anyone in the face, but still, no, I've never spoken to a flat earther. I've never spoken to
spoken to a flat earther.
moon truther. I've never really given it much thought, but I think there's a great episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where they're talking about religion and science and climate change or something like that.
Oh God, okay.
And one of the climate science deniers asks the question, have you read all the papers denying, like advocating for climate change? And they're like, no. And he goes, so how do you know it's true? Well, and then, they answer like, well, I'm taking it on good faith. He goes, you mean like religion? And it kind of goes into this thing. I thought it was a nice ironic touch, but it is, I kind of fall more on the, hey, if 99% of the population believes this to be true and 99% of scientists believe this to be true, I'm going to go with the scientists on this one, especially on a topic that I will admit, not knowing a lot about. I don't know a lot about gravitational geography or interplanetary geography, but I do believe the Earth is round.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So
we've been on airplanes.
Yeah, we've been on airplanes. I believe that, I've lived in the southern hemisphere and moved to the northern hemisphere. So I'm kind of on board with that. I've never had to deal with that.
I'm glad.
The main part of Zach's question, actually, it reminded me of one particular film, but I don't know if you've got a film in mind that you can think of with this question in mind as well, which is, from a filmmaker's point of view, how do you create suspense when everyone in the audience knows the outcome? And obviously he references Solo there, which is a film you saw, I didn't see.
Yes.
Did you feel like the fact that Solo will obviously live and go on into later movies, did you feel that impacted your experience of that movie?
No, because that movie to me, it was fine. But I enjoyed it on a back end fixing a film that was in hell from the studio's point of view perspective with Ron Howard. Like, I watched that movie more as an education in picking up pieces of a puzzle that someone ordered and said it should have looked like, the Statue of Liberty, and they had to turn into a Han Solo movie.
Right. So, but you're referring to then the fact that Chris Lord and Phil Miller were fired off that movie. Ron Howard came in and had to pick it up. I guess the question here, though, is with forgetting that, when you were watching the movie and you were watching action scenes where Han Solo might be in peril, were you ever
No.
I think they might not come out of this?
No, and any character that had something bad happen to them or die, they butter up pretty heavily in that film. So It's like it's coming.
I think this is the broader implication of this happens in superhero movies for me, where we know that there are sequels coming out, and we know that this is a franchise, and that they're known, and so I find for myself in those situations that I'm often derailed by the action sequence because I'm like, well, I know they're going to get out of this.
So here's the deal. Infinity War.
Right.
Infinity War is incredibly effective for me. I've watched it 4 times at this point.
Oh, good God.
And every time I get the same feelings and pangs of hurt, pain, and sadness when the end happens. Obviously, A, I now know the ending.
Yeah.
B, but the first time I saw it, when I saw Spider-Man, a.k.a. I Don't Feel So Good, disappear into dust. You sent me that meme earlier today, by the way.
Yeah.
I know that Spider-Man Far From Home is coming out.
Right.
But
and
it's
Black
still,
Panther,
but
and
it's still effective, and I think it has to do with, it's film craft. You can go into the sort of different things of what will sort of get you to feel a certain way.
Yeah.
I will say, while I did enjoy First Man, I never the suspense factor for me only happened in the missions I wasn't familiar with, all the missions leading up to it.
Okay.
During the moon one, I never felt scared for them.
Okay.
I found it very interesting. And the thing that I was sort of in suspense about was the interpersonal stuff that happens a little bit on the moon as well. Now which is whether or not you, I've been watching a lot of interviews with with Lance, with Neil. Wow, I can't even speak.
Lance Armstrong.
Lance Armstrong's family.
You're thinking about the wrong movie.
I'm thinking about 3 different movies with his family, and we'll get into what happens sort of on the moon, but that's not an actual fact, at least as far as they know. Some things that happen on there, though there is a period of, I believe, 7 minutes when he was walking towards a crater that is not on camera. and it was like and not on comms. So there was a full 7 minutes where he was alone, other than Buzz Aldrin.
Okay. Oh, no, I think we're getting into specifics on First Man. I still want to address this question that Zach has about how do you think a film like Infinity War creates suspense when you know what the ending is. Now, obviously, the Infinity War is slightly different because
because it's not historically.
It's not historical, and the first time you watched it, you had no idea what the ending was going to be.
Right.
So the film that I thought of in relation to this question was Bryan Singer's movie Valkyrie, which is a Tom Cruise vehicle from, I think it was 2008 or something.
Yeah, something like
that. Where it was about the mission to assassinate Adolf Hitler by one of his lieutenants, and the film basically shows you the intricate plotting of this plan. And I remember the thing about that movie that was kind of amazing for me, which I think is similar to what Zach is talking about here, is though I know Hitler didn't die during World War II, but I still watched that going, this is almost going to happen.
Sure.
And I think the reason is what a filmmaker is. The best thing I can think of in terms from a filmmaker's perspective is that you need to be a bit of a magician. And what I mean by being a magician is magic craft requires the actor the art of distraction. And that is basically focusing your attention on one thing while doing something on the back end. That's generally what magicians do in order to like execute a magic trick.
Sure.
And so I think in the case of, Valkyrie, for example, and in the case of Apollo, First Man, there is a sense of making sure we're not thinking too much about the eventual outcome, unless that's the purpose of the movie, and thinking about the actual immediacy of the details that need to go into executing the plan. And I think there's a sort of a process of I guess, magical hypnosis that happens to any audience member. There is a technical psychological term for it. I think it's, this is probably wrong, but the term suture in terms of psychology and psychoanalysis comes into play. But there's a process where you believe yourself to be part of the narrative and you transfer your emotional state to that of the characters, and you kind of psychologically transfer. And I think if a movie is effective in doing that, then you will become engrossed in the immediacy of the problem in front of you and not the long term, like how did this actually end up? Like, I know Hitler didn't die, but I'm still like in the movie, I'm thinking about what it is for this character to have to like lay this explosive.
Is there, with this sort of psychological phenomena, I'll call it, is there specific triggers or things that cause that to happen in a large group of the population, or is it different folks, different strokes? I'm curious about that because, for instance, I did not have, and I guess I kind of just answering my question now, I did not have the feeling that I didn't know what was going to happen in the last mission. I was never in suspense in the last mission, at least for that.
Right.
I was in suspense about some character moments. But never the mission itself. So I can't relate to this in particular. I have had that feeling before, and I know Infinity War is not a good, now that we're sort of getting deeper into it, it's not a good analogy for this. I'm trying to think of where I was actually scrolling through our old episodes because I feel like we've talked about this before, and I just can't remember where.
Okay.
The Darkest Hour, I'm looking at that, for instance. That was something that while I know the outcome of, but I feel like, again, that's more of a character's emotional journey, I think, to get to a place I know that it's going. So I don't think it's
The Post is another example where we know the story. But it depends about how well you actually know the story.
Yeah.
In film theory, there's a couple of different ways to tackle this question. There's, I think the most predominant way is how well the film crafts the experience of psychological transference. And a lot of that has to do, in early studies, is on the point of view shot. So the famous one is the Kuleshov effect, basically where you show a image of something and then cut to a reaction shot of a face, which is just blank, then show another image and then cut to the reaction shot, and the image changes. We then psychologically transfer our opinion. So if the face is just looking blank and he's looking at a baby, then we immediately, the reaction from most audience members is empathy. If the object turns into a train coming at you, we infer that the face now has fear on it. And I think that's the sort of psychological. But then there are all sorts of different studies that are much further than this, that go into, like, for example, the reason why certain races of cultures, respond to certain movies in different ways than other races, because there's a certain...
That's probably a cultural and a historical...
Yeah. There's a way to kind of read film that is significant to your cultural, historical perspective. So there's lots of ways to look at that. To me, I think it comes... the broader answer to Zach's question, for me, and this is, not a definitive answer, but I think it has to do with creating enough of an atmosphere where we transfer our experience to that of the characters and are then dealing through the problems that they're dealing with, and we're not thinking about the end, which is what a magician does as well. Like not knowing that they're reaching behind their pocket to pull out the ending and just focusing on the thing that they're showing us in front of us.
And you know what's interesting about First Man is the sequence that we're talking about, going to the moon. I was so engrossed in the science of it and and honestly the look of it and how real that moment felt that I wasn't ever feeling anxious. I was more just enjoying the ride. Even like it's kind of strange but in this particular case of this film, like I'm trying to like go back into my mental state as I was watching it. And I didn't have any trepidation in that, other than the first test that I didn't know the historical. I had moments in there, but not the same as like, oh, I think he's gonna die here. Like I know he's not gonna die here, but like bad stuff can happen, and bad stuff does happen.
Yeah.
So
I think I'm gonna disagree with you there in terms of my reaction, which is that I found those sequences very claustrophobic, and I was so fixated on the little details that I think I'm sort of with Zach on this.
But here's a question. This is interesting. You mentioned claustrophobic because there's a lot of claustrophobia shots in here, and they did that on purpose, and it gives you a certain feeling and a certain reaction when you're doing it. Is that reaction though worry for the characters or your reaction to feeling like you're in a claustrophobic space? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's a difference. I just don't know how to discern it. Like you're not worried. You're not worried because you think he's going to die or the mission's going to go wrong, but just the situation that the character is immediately in.
No, so what I think
has a psychological effect.
what I think happens there is that the psychological transference is slightly more complicated than me just thinking about myself versus me thinking about the character. What happens for me, and I think what might be a better explanation of that, is that what happens is I transfer my fears into the character, and therefore what I do is I am fearful because I believe I am the character.
Isn't the character transferring their fears to you?
No, because film is not a two-way street. The film is just communicating.
But if you're experiencing it on that level,
right,
it kind of is.
No, so what I think what we're saying here is that you're wondering, the question is whether you are fearful for the character or you are fearful for yourself in that situation. And I would argue that unless you're like chronically claustrophobic or something like that, where it's actually a physical discomfort to being in a movie theater, you don't necessarily become claustrophobic in a movie theater. What you do is you transfer your fear into that character and then experience their claustrophobia as an observer. So,
but one could argue, and I'm not trying to be a contrarian. I'm trying to just sort of see it from a different angle.
Yeah.
You're saying,
this is, and I believe the technical term for this is the suture effect, and that's when you transfer your psychology. It has a lot to do with point of view shots
into a character on screen.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think it's the term transferring is what is sort of I'm hanging up on. Yeah. Because you're not transferring anything to anything. It's still inside you, and it's still an outside stimuli that is affecting you.
Right.
I don't know. I think
you're talking there about elements of perception and like, yes, obviously all elements of perception are internal to you because it's impossible to experience perception through another person.
Sure.
Right.
And especially it's impossible to experience perception from another inanimate thing, but our brain does a little bit of trickery.
Our brain does that, and that's also why we have empathy as well. Is that we?
Why some people have empathy?
Yeah, is we can transfer our emotions to the characters on screens and feel for their response.
Hey everyone, go vote on November 6th. But it's an interesting question, and I don't know if any answer we've given, even my own, I'm 100% happy with. Maybe let's talk about the film a little more, and maybe we can circle back to that at the end, because this is what I will say. First off, straight up. Is this movie, while I enjoyed my time in the theater, and while looking at it was a technical marvel, and I think everyone sort of involved really like sold it for me. I loved even the film type grain it was shot on. I loved the shaky camness of a lot of it. I loved the science behind it. I loved the supporting cast. In my preparation for this podcast, I was trying to be like, what's my big takeaway? Like, what was my feeling of this? And I was like, I enjoyed my time. Like, it doesn't have a lasting psychological effect on me other than getting me more interested in the actual story.
Okay.
Which is great for a film to do, and I think it's important. I mean, for me and everyone. I mean, hell, people that weren't. I mean, obviously, we weren't born then, but the
and if we were, we would have done even less.
But like,
by
think
now.
about it. Like, people who learn this stuff is like, oh yeah, he landed on the moon, or we moon landing or whatever, and you're like, yeah, of course we did, because we have computers the size of our pocket now. Like, it just makes sense now, and I think it's taken not knowing the full story or not having it presented to you in an engaging way could kind of, like, in school or if you're learning about this for the first time as a young person, it's like, yeah, no shit, but it's like the actual visceral feeling of it was really great to get me energized about the story again. But the film itself isn't something that I'm going to, I think, come back to.
Right.
And that's not, I don't want that to come off as a slight. It's just, it was sort of my reaction to it. Like, I enjoyed my time, but I don't think I'd watch it again.
Okay.
Maybe certain sequences in IMAX I would love to if that was an opportunity, but yeah, I don't know.
We should talk about in detail why you think that is. But I'll just kind of give you my quick impression, which is that it is a movie that I greatly admired but didn't enjoy.
Okay.
Which is that to say I did really. It was a film that when I watched it, I understood what it was going for. I understood the sense that it was attempting not to do something like Apollo 13 or The Right Stuff or anything like that, where it was getting us involved in the detail. It was trying to focus in on the emotional journey of this man to the moon, and in a way, it kind of does that sort of kind of remarkable thing. I think Mark Kermode of Kermode Reviews kind of described it this way. It's like Jaws. It's a movie that's not really about the shark, and this movie's not really about the moon. It's about this man's emotional journey to another place. And I kind of agree with that, and I see that is what this film is trying to do. I really admire Chazelle at this point, branching away from being the music guy. He's written Grand Piano. He wrote and directed Whiplash. He wrote and directed La La Land. And so he could arguably be pigeonholed into being the music guy. And this is a kind of a step away from being the music guy. It is a movie ostensibly about
science. One small step away?
Is it? But the question here is it a small step for a man or small step for man? That was the big controversy around Neil Armstrong's phrase. I will say this. Though I deeply admired it, it is kind of my least engaging of his films, though I kind of think it is the broadest stroke of filmmaking that he has done to this point. And for that, I am, in deep admiration of what it is, what it stands for, what it is trying to do. But I found it, on the whole, a little bit unresonant for me, as in a couple of things. There's a couple of issues at play here that make it unresonant for me, which is one, that I enjoy the idea of the exceptional man. I enjoy the idea of thinking of people like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin as people who are exceptional, who have the ability to kind of problem solve in extraordinary ways, and who demonstrate time and time again that they are specifically selected because of their extraordinary ability, their tenacity, their intelligence, and their ability to problem solve. And I think this film kind of shies away from that on purpose, to say that this is also a film about a deeply introverted man who is an emotionally not stunted, but emotionally hindered man who finds an outlet in his work. Now, I really admire that. I really admire that this is trying to do something different to everything else we've seen about space exploration, or even how we would think of someone like Neil Armstrong. But I found that the emotional story that this film is trying to tell a little bit unresonant. I don't know if unresonant is the correct usage of that phrase, but I didn't. The sort of final reveal of what he does in that sort of isolated moment on the moon is a moment I kind of saw coming from a long time away. And I also didn't find it particularly emotionally compelling, though it might have been true. There's a couple of reasons I want to sort of point out about why I found that moment not emotionally compelling. And it felt a little bit like the filmmakers reaching for a meaning for this moment, and one that I think they had to reach very far from. I think they did a good job with it, and it does work for a lot of people, but it didn't work for me.
I'm gonna have a hot take.
Okay.
You ready for this? this movie suffers the same problem, just in a much different way, as Bad Times at the El Royale. And that problem is a connectivity issue.
No, I don't think that's the case.
Between basically it's what the movie itself is telling you is important.
Yeah.
And what the movie actually shows us as important.
No, I think I know what you're saying there is the Bad Times in El Royale has an ending which sort of points to something entirely different to what the film has been about the entire time. I think First Man is very clear about what it's about the entire time. This movie is about an emotionally introverted man who finds a way to release himself through work, and that's where the end of the movie is. I just don't think that story, for me, was particularly emotionally resonant.
I think what I mean is this movie is telling you, I'll back up slightly. That's what it felt like for me, because this movie is 100% telling you what it thinks is important, and that is the interpersonal life of how this man dealt with his family to get his work done to go to the moon. That's not why I went to it, and it didn't convince me that was the important thing when I was there. I went into it because I was curious about some history, seeing sort of the pieces of this story that I'd never seen in detail as close as this movie gets, and witnessing to the best of my visual acumen and what is available currently, having the closest experience to experience what that man must have felt when he went to the moon.
I think, but isn't that a case of your expectation versus because I don't think the film ever.
Oh, sure, 100%. Again, that's why I backed up. Yeah. That's why I backed up and said this is why I'm feeling this way.
Yeah.
But I think what the other sort of side of my point is the two stories, the interpersonal story and the story of him going to the moon, don't really connect. It could have been anything. It could have been two different things and two different whatevers, and you'd have the exact same effect.
That's the Jaws analogy, which is that it's a movie about, it's not really about the shark.
Right.
You know what I
mean? But it's not really about either of it. Well, it's about one thing, I guess. It's just that... and you know what? Maybe this is why everything... No, because it's also historical. I was going to say maybe this is why things didn't resonate, like, you ever felt danger or things like that. But so let's talk about Ryan Gosling real quick. This is by far my favorite of his stoic, not speaking, staring off to the side of camera performances. I'm saying that like as a joke, but it's also kind of true. Like, I think he's very effective. I think he's doing what he's supposed to be doing with this character.
Yeah.
But I think that character in particular that he's been tasked to play and do very well is not something that is easy to engage with in the suture?
Suture. The suture effect.
The suture effect. It's not the easiest character to suture your empathy or your emotional state onto. Now, it's probably incredibly sort of accurate as to who Lance Armstrong was as a person.
Neil Armstrong?
Wow, I can't get names right today. Neil Armstrong, Lance, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, one took steroids, one went to the moon.
Which one? Which one? Neil Armstrong. It's probably exactly how he was and how people saw him and experienced him. But as a viewer, I'm more like, not connected because I'm kind of frustrated with how that is. And again, that's me trying to get into someone else's shoes, and I understand that's impossible. But it's strange that, like, I was so on, like, if I had to pick like emotional sides, I was on his wife's emotional side the entire time.
Yeah.
But
it's the reason I had a giant grin as you said this is my favorite Ryan Gosling performance is that because I know you and I have
his silent staring performance.
His silent staring performance is that you and I have clashed before on whether we think Gosling is an effective actor. I think particularly if we look at the film Drive. But in my notes I have here, this is my least favorite of Gosling's silent stoic performances. Which is this to me. I think he is the right choice.
Oh, 100%.
He's the exact right choice
to do this.
To do what
they asked for.
What they asked for in this particular film.
Yes.
But it's like, but it's one where I think to me the problem here comes down to, for example, in a film like Drive, I really like Drive because I'm not sure about that guy, and I'm constantly looking into the piercing blue eyes of Ryan Gosling and trying to figure it out. Whereas in this film, I kind of the writing is telling me what to feel about this character, and the actor is delivering that performance. So I'm not actually that invested in what his journey is.
You're right. The writing and drive does not inform us about anything.
Well, to me, the writing and drive informs me about
No,
gives me
I'm
clues.
agreeing.
Yeah, gives me clues about this person might be a sociopath, or I'm not too sure. This movie was written. First Man was written by Josh Singer, who also wrote Spotlight and was a co-writer on The Post. And it is kind of his, I guess you could argue, his second film of reinterpreting a major event from an alternate point of view. The previous one being The Post, which was also written by Liz Hanna, about the Washington Post's attempt to publish the Pentagon Papers. But the thing about that movie was that, and we noted this in our review of The Post as well, is that we were kind of perplexed as to how the Washington Post kind of ignored, or that movie ignored the contribution of the New York Times, and then focused instead on Catherine Graham, the owner of the Post, as her decision to allow the publishing of that paper, which it's an interesting take, but not one that kind of entirely resonated. It certainly didn't resonate with me.
It did with me.
And I think this is a similar sort of take, which is that, we've got a movie like Apollo 13 already out there. We've got movies like the documentary The Shadow of the Moon. These movies do go into detail about these people. And so what both Singer and Chazelle want to do here is focus us in on the emotional state of this character. The thing that I found difficult about this, from a storytelling point of view, it was one, like you, I was on Claire Foy's side, Karen, Janet, his wife.
Janet.
I was entirely kind of with her, but it's a thankless role, that film role that we've seen in movies a dozen times before. It's the wife at home kind of keeping it together while the husband is off, basically trying to explore the planet or explore the outer rims of the planet.
Go to the moon.
Exactly. So it's a thankless role, and I think she does a terrific job, and I think she does an amazing job to give that character some life, to not be kind of to be supportive, but not to be pulling him back from going to the moon. I think
not being a pushover too.
Yeah, and I think it's a really delicate thing that she does there, to make sure that role isn't just a thankless role. Unfortunately, the thing that I sort of that makes the film feel difficult to me is that, the thing we've been tiptoeing around this entire thing, and this discussion so far, and it's a spoiler at this point now, we're into spoilers, is that we realize that the film's suggestion is that the entire impetus for him going to the moon and his sorrow and his introvertedness is the death of his daughter Karen at the age of 2, whom he takes to the moon and throws her bangle into the moon. I was kind of watching it going, this suffers from that Christopher Nolan problem. And Christopher Nolan might have had a hand in this film. I know him and Damien Chazelle have been hanging out. In that I was like, you got 2 other kids sitting around here, and you seem to be ignoring them as well.
Well, hold on. Okay, let's stop for a second. One, the loss of a child would affect people, and everyone. Of course, that's something that is psychologically something that I cannot personally imagine, and I'm sure would have problems with stunting your emotional state towards other children, towards your family, towards other people in general. So that's not something that I don't believe. Okay. But the main thing is when I was watching this, and this is why I feel like it's disconnected. I never felt like the death of his daughter was any sort of driving force for him to go to the moon. He was just an engineer who was obsessed with work.
Right.
And probably was using work as a crutch to not think about things. And
he says that at the beginning
exactly.
of the movie,
but it never felt to me that he was doing it for some higher emotional reason tethered to his daughter. It was work as a distraction. I have an amazing job that takes a lot of my time, and that was all I had. So now listen, then when in the beginning when we see the bracelet, the bangle bracelet that you said when he puts it in the drawer, I'm like, well, he's bringing that to the moon.
Yeah, of course he is.
And then he brings it to the moon and he does the thing and whatever. And that's supposed to be a moment of catharsis or something, or closure, or
emotional release.
But it wasn't. It the movie never showed me enough of the connective tissue. And again, this is why I go back to a little bit of the El Royale problem. I know it's different, but this is it invoked the same feelings of I see your 2 narratives. I don't see them connecting well.
I see. I think the film actually does a really good job in that. And there's a scene where Gosling is walking along with Ed White, who's the other pilot who died in the Apollo 1 mission.
Yes.
And Ed has kind of has been talking to Janet, his wife, and says, and Janet asks him, does he ever talk to you about Karen? Does he ever mention it? And he says, no, he never does. And there's a scene later on in the movie where they're walking down a street, down one of their streets, and Gosling, Neil Armstrong kind of remarks that a neighbor has installed a swing set.
Yes.
That the kind that Karen has. And Jason kind of, and Ed White kind of looks at him and says, and realizes this is the closest he's ever opened up about Karen to him. And he's kind of like, he wants to probe him, wants to push him a little bit on this, but he doesn't want to gently nudge. And he realizes also this is probably the one of the few times that he's seen Neil Armstrong kind of
as a human being.
Yeah, also concerned about something other than just problem solving, like he seems to have something else on his mind. And so that coupled with the scenes of Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong giving a press conference and being asked, "What are you going to take to the moon?" And Buzz Aldrin says, "I'm going to take some jewelry." Who doesn't want to do this? And Neil Armstrong completely dismisses the question and says, "I would rather take more fuel." But we realize that the thing he has an answer to this question. He just doesn't want anyone to know about it. And I knew that's what he was thinking. I saw like 4 or 5 instances of that bracelet coming back. We see flashes of the daughter the entire time.
Right.
And then
all of that,
and then we get to the end. I think that's a complete straight line of what this film is trying to do.
But there's something, and again, all of those scenes are there.
Yeah,
there's no question. But it never linked to me. That moment when he's talking to his friend, to Ed White, in the on the street is an emotionally powerful movie that. To me, the movie never connected in a way that made it have anything to do with the moon. It's still about. Or going to the moon. It's still about a man healing. That moment is about a man healing from the death of his daughter, or trying, or going down the path of whatever, and almost taking a turning point to doing so.
And the end of the movie is the same thing. It's about a man healing from the loss of his daughter.
But
that's
what I'm
not
saying
really
is
about the moon.
But thematically, they're not like the movie doesn't tie them together. It has these two things going on that it does well. It doesn't tie them. And if you're going to take that road, and you're going to sort of like, here's what it does. It infers it. It does not confirm it for me.
Right.
And so like I'm watching the movie do it, and I'm seeing what like the pins it's setting up to knock down, but I don't see the method of which it's going to be all connected, and because I don't think it's ever there. Again, I'm sorry. I don't want to crap on this movie.
Right.
I think it's good. I would love to see it or pieces of it in IMAX. While I was in the theater, I was engaged.
Right.
But I also remember not feeling particularly emotionally resonant, other than a human being witnessing one of the most an amalgamation of one of the most amazing things that mankind has ever accomplished.
I agree with that point, was that I didn't find the film particularly resonant.
Yeah.
But I admired that it was trying to do something different from what we would expect of this story. And I admired that it was trying to do an emotional, like it wasn't getting too much into the weeds about how how do you actually get a man to the moon?
I feel like, though, and maybe it's just the movies I've been watching lately, it kind of did exactly what I expected it to do in a way. Like it's
compared to Apollo 13, say.
Sure, but that's years ago, and I'm talking about in the cultural zeitgeist.
To Interstellar, for example.
Well, Interstellar's kind of similar.
Interstellar does a similar thing, but it also has a lot of science and technology behind it. Whereas I didn't find.
But Interstellar also has an ending that punches itself in the throat. My point is, I like the direction this movie went with these two stories, even though I don't think they came together entirely well throughout.
Yeah.
I didn't not see it coming.
Yeah.
It makes total sense, especially in the climate of filmmaking today. It's 100% different than Apollo 13. Yeah, but Apollo 13 was what, 1996, 97?
I think the reason why I say it's different is that, the thing I said before is I like the exceptional man story.
Yeah.
And I think what this is trying to do is say, no, this is a human being first before he's an exceptional man. And this is the story of this human being.
But almost in a way, Ryan Gosling's performance is so good at the robotic engineer that I never get the catharsis outside of that one particular moment you're talking about where it almost happens.
Yeah.
That I get the connection. And yeah, he randomly sees visions of his daughter around, etc. throughout the film. But his face doesn't, or his emotional state doesn't really change a lot, or if it is, it's so minute. And again, skill to Ryan Gosling, because maybe he played it real small.
Yeah.
And maybe people that
Playing
are more
real close to the chest.
maybe people that are more visually empathetic than I maybe picked up on some of that stuff. And again, playing true to the character.
Yeah, but I think that's the other thing that's tricky about this is that, and you watch some interviews with Neil Armstrong as well. Is I think like by all accounts he was a fairly introverted, quiet.
He was an engineer. He wanted to do his work.
Yeah, just did the work kind of guy. So I like that the film did that. I admire it for doing that. I didn't particularly find it completely compellingly resonant.
Right.
At all. So I think we're kind of coming to the same conclusion for different reasons here.
Yes.
But coming to the same conclusions nonetheless.
Agreed.
I want to talk about a couple of other things in this movie that I thought were really exceptional. Really
Fine.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like we've been agreeing too much lately, so I'm going to get indignant.
Okay. All right. Get indignant, Dignan. The score. I loved the score.
Yeah,
by
I like
Justin,
the score too.
Justin,
Damn it!
Justin Hurwitz, his third collaboration with
It was so good.
with Damien Chazelle. It's so good because it invokes. I think the one thing in terms of the actual technical side of this film that this film really does dig into is the terror of going up into space. It feels like a horror movie in places. Like the camera focuses in on the rivets, shaking around.
A lot of rivet shots.
Yeah, shaking around, and like all I can think of is like the thing that is like basically protecting you from open space is this like 2-cent piece of metal.
There's a line from the trailer which you wouldn't know because you don't watch the trailers, but it's the Swiss Army knife line. Where he's like, "Anyone got a Swiss Army knife?" As they're bolting him into the thing, and they're like, "Are you kidding me?"
I mean, I saw that in the movie.
Yeah, but that was a fun moment in the trailer.
So I love that the score kind of amped up the terror, but also found a little space to kind of do the almost Kubrickian dance of space. There's a moment when they're docking with the algae, I think it was called.
Gemini.
The Gemini was docking.
They were the Gemini.
Yeah, we're docking with the
other craft.
Algeny. Yeah, whatever it was. That's how much we know about space.
Yep.
But like there is a sort of like magical, Tchaikovskyan dance that's going on there that's really beautiful. That kind of reminds you, oh yeah, they're in space. And space is beautiful if you look at it from the right angle.
If you look at it from the safety of not being in space.
Exactly. If you're looking at it from the outside. So I kind of loved. I love the score. I love the cinematography by Linus Sandberg.
Mm-hmm.
Again, his second collaboration with Damien Chazelle. The thing that you would have missed out on is this tricky thing that happens in the theater when you go to see it in IMAX. So when I go to see it in IMAX, I'm like, where are the IMAX scenes? The whole movie is letterboxed all the way through. And then at the end of the movie, at the very, very end of the movie, like when it's not even before they land on space.
No, it's probably when he goes right outside.
It's when the pod bay doors open.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
And the camera like swoops down, and the camera does this amazing like trick of keyframes where it's shaky down the stairs, and then it like flattens out into a perfectly smooth shot, and then the screen is filled.
Yep.
And we're in IMAX, and I thought that was just this wonderful pointed use.
That's great.
Because the one thing I've really had a distaste for in the sort of mixed IMAX 35mm films, like Christopher Nolan does, like Crystal McQuarrie does for Mission Impossible, is that they sort of intercut between IMAX and 35mm depending on which scene they're in.
Yeah.
So in Interstellar, you would be in like the black hole scene, and it's like this gorgeous IMAX, and then you'd cut back to the ship, and you'd be in 35mm, and then cut back outside, and you're like, it's just changing depending on the shot. And
Right.
I find that really haphazard, and it like, takes me out of the movie.
God, why are we agreeing?
But this was such a pronounced, pointed moment. It was like this is the reason IMAX exists.
I love things like aspect ratio changes or even 3D when it is used for a narrative purpose.
Yeah, and it completely is here.
Again, the 3D equivalent of this is obviously not as as inspiring of a moment in a movie, but Tron Legacy. When they go into the Tron, then it's 3D. When they're in the real world, it's not. That's a thematic way to use 3D to tell a story and make you feel differently about a narrative. This sounds amazing that it transitions in that way.
And the reason is as well is like I
you got so used to it.
Yeah, and I also like paid the premium to go see it in IMAX. And
Were
I was
you
like,
pissed until then?
Yeah, and I was like, oh wait, when are we doing the IMAX thing?
That's funny.
And then it happens, and you're like, oh, good way to go, Damien.
Good on you, Damien.
Yeah, well done, sir. Well done to you. It is the reason why you won Best Director. And so I love that kind of pointed use of it. I think I also loved the kind of the absolute terror of space travel. You know, the sense that this film gets across is how close death is around the corner for every one of these characters. It's not it's not an abstract thing. You know, you will die, and there will. I love. There was a scene with Janet, you know, with Ed's wife, you know, and she's standing by the car and the car door is open.
Yeah.
And we're like, what is in that trunk? And we realize that this is just a person who's almost rendered catatonic because of the loss of their husband.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives you the weight of this is what the journey means, is death for most of these people. And you kind of, I think you get, I mean, The Right Stuff did this as well, and I think Apollo 13 to an extent did this. But it is an example of how you never really think that NASA is just pulling it together by the seat of its pants, but it literally is pulling it together by the seat of its pants. Now it's got, you know, incredible engineers, incredible mathematicians, people all working together to like make this happen. But it's not like a ride at Disneyland, you know, like where the ride has been tried, tested, true before you get on it. So the experience of fear is entirely simulated. You know, the experience of fear here is entirely real because it's warranted in this case. And we don't know what the vacuum of space will do to you. And there's only a thin layer protected. I remember, I think one of my favorite, I think it was Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin's quote, who said something along the lines of, the thing that terrifies me the most is that the contract to build the spacecraft went to the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
You know, so I just love that. I don't think that's really, you know, really shown that much in here. And then coming back to finally that sense of the defiance of heroism and even exceptionalism, which I think is a really interesting, unique idea. There was another film that
the defiance of it?
Yeah, like never really like embracing the jingoism of this American character going to the moon and being a hero, and like, you know, like the way we think about Neil Armstrong. You know, I think of him as, you know, like he's one of the great explorers of our time kind of thing. And I think the film kind of defies that expectation by making it about his human story and this human difficulty of like getting over the death of his daughter. And I like that.
I guess I didn't really think about it.
I think you know, like even to the point, Ted Cruz, was it Ted Cruz or people were tweeting?
Is it something bad?
Yeah.
Then it was probably Ted Cruz.
No, it wasn't. It was actually Marco Rubio. But at the first screenings of this movie, I believe at Cannes, people started tweeting about how there was no heroic American flag on the moon.
What?
And then
Yes, there was.
And then politicians started tweeting about how dare they do this. You know, like NASA was a
what?
Yeah, you should read up. I think. Hang on, I'm gonna pull
this is fucking. There's like 5 shots of American flags, a couple of which in slow mo.
Here we go. Marco Rubio slams the U.S. flag commissioner and first man and uses Twitter. He says,
I love how all these fucking these politicians literally, like, since Trump has been doing it, they all try to do it and they all just fucking fail.
Marco Rubio tweeted in response to, I think, Ryan Goslings said something at the press conference, said they decided not to include the flag planting because of Armstrong's accomplishment transcended countries and borders, as that's what Gosling said. And Marco Rubio tweeted, "This is total lunacy and a disservice at a time when our people need reminders that we can achieve when we work together. The American people paid for that mission on rockets built by Americans with American technology and carrying an American astronaut. It wasn't a UN mission," says Marco Rubio. So the film,
heaven forbid we inspire people, you fucking Rube. I love his name is Rubio.
Yeah.
It's just so fucking perfect.
People jumped onto this idea that there wasn't enough American flags in the film. Someone even did a recut A Star Is Born trailer in response to Marco Rubio's complaint and put, you know, like the song where he's singing in front of the crowd.
Yeah.
They planted all these American flags inside the crowd to say the Marco Rubio cut, which I love.
God.
But you know what I'm saying? The film doesn't, you know, like say America rah rah rah. It's about this guy.
Yeah, and it's about it's about this guy, and if you go bigger, it's about humanity.
Yeah, but it doesn't even make him out to be a hero. You know, he's just a guy. And I kind of like that about it.
Sure. Sorry, I want to go back to the flag thing. There is a definite shot of the American flag on the moon in front of the lander.
Probably. I can't recall. I was thinking about.
You don't see it planted.
Yeah.
But you see it already having been planted, like.
And maybe this is a good case study for examples of people who having false outrage at things that they haven't seen, which is what people have.
What a dipshit!
Oh well, he's a dipshit in more ways than one. But go vote November 6th. at any rate, so I love that sort of that defiance of heroism, the defiance of exceptionalism. There was another movie at the start of this year, or middle of the year we did, which was called You Were Never Really Here. You didn't, you weren't here for that one. You were never really here.
Meta.
But that was a film that kind of did the same thing, and I think, in my mind, a little bit more successfully than this, because again, I didn't find this particularly resonant. But again, I like that this is a sort of a, like we're going, hey, we're doing this big story. The thing that amazed me was the idea, like they were like, oh, we're doing the film about Neil Armstrong going on the moon. I was like, haven't we done that movie before? Isn't there a bunch of movies about Neil Armstrong going to the moon? I realized there wasn't, and then I also realized it was like, oh, we're not going to do Apollo 13 again. We're not going to do Shadow of the Moon. We're going to do something different with this. Mm-hmm. I like that. I kind of dug that, and I appreciated and admired that. That's it. Still didn't resonate for me.
Look, I think it's a film that I liked watching. And I know I'm reiterating this, but like I feel like I've been overly negative. Mm-hmm. I think people should see it. You know what? And I don't just think Americans should see it. Like I'm sorry. It's a transcendent moment for humanity. And if you can't get behind that, I don't know how to interact with you as a human being. Like
the Russians might think differently of that.
Look, but if the Russians had made it,
do you think Americans would be as proud of the Russian explorers? Like, do we know the name of the people who made the first Russian orbit?
No. But the fact that might be the failing of a school system, that might be a failing of my own personal exploration into the knowledge behind this. What I'm saying is, if you we would all be better off if we could take accomplishments like that. I mean, fuck, we take credit for all sorts of shit that we didn't do. So like, it's just like, this is an amazing, like, a human shouldn't be there, and we put him there. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit rage fueled right now, and I haven't even been drinking yet.
Okay, well, you should get on that.
I'll get started. I mean, hell, Friday night, baby, woo! Go see First Man, and I this is something that I'll end sort of my final thoughts with. I would like more people writing in, like our listeners before, with their experiences to see if, like, maybe I feel like, again, Shahir, you and I again sort of agree, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
But we're still feeling not connected to it. I want to hear about people that were really hardcore connected to it, because I will never think I will never say that this movie doesn't have that ability. I actually believe it can. I just don't. I didn't experience it, so I want to hear more from people that have. So again, I think it is an incredibly visually stunning film. I think that the score is fucking great. I think all of the performers did an excellent job. I think Damien did a fantastic job directing. I think the cinematography was marvelous, and it always confuses me when all of that stuff is so great and it still doesn't pang me in the feels.
There's one thing you didn't mention in that laundry list.
What was it?
Was the screenplay.
Yeah.
And that might be the thing.
Maybe that's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel I don't want to malign it.
Yeah.
But I can't win good faith say like this is amazing.
Yeah. I know this is working for a lot of people, fellow critics, people who listen to our podcast. This is as Zach said, this is a film that really, really works for them. It didn't quite work for me, though. I did really deeply admire this film and what it was trying to do. I would wholeheartedly recommend seeing it in IMAX. I feel like it might sort of it might kind of get the sort of Dunkirk equation kind of put on it in terms of its longevity. Dunkirk ended up being a real dad film, like dads taking their kids to see a war movie, an IMAX kind of movie. And I think this might maybe do that, in terms of like a longevitous box office, although it hasn't done as well as it could have. Who knows? I am not entirely on board with this film, though again, deeply admire it. Would see it again. I would wholeheartedly see it again. I would definitely give it another shot to see if maybe the second time around it was more emotionally resonant. But I think the key factor in the thing that you didn't mention there was the script. Just like in The Post, I think this is a film that doesn't quite resonate. Although another script that Josh Singer wrote was Spotlight, which was one that deeply emotionally resonated with me, and that was focused entirely on details and not on character. Entirely on details.
I think we all remember how I felt about Spotlight, so that kind of lines up with my current analogy.
Yeah, so there you go.
Hey, by the way, I just want to say straight up, because we forgot this once, and go back and listen and see if you can figure out which out of our 185 episodes we forgot to do this in. Here's the IMDb for the film, because we didn't do it up top. A look at the life of astronaut Neil Armstrong and the legendary space mission that led him to become the first man to walk on the moon on July 20th, 1969.
So, yeah, that's
it's accurate, but it's not. It's like half the movie.
Well, it's also the legendary. Like there's something about what this film is trying to do that doesn't quite line up with
that description,
with making him feel legendary. It's really about a human being kind of with ordinary problems.
And about the accomplishment itself outside of the human being.
Yeah.
So I think I will say I agree with the legendary space mission. That's not talking about saying he's legendary. That's saying the space mission is legendary.
But the film is not, and I'm saying, he, by all accounts, is a legendary human being. I just don't think that's what this film is trying to say.
Right. But I'm saying that this description says that the mission was legend. Wait for it. Dairy glass of milk. I'm saying that it's not saying that he is legendary. It's saying the mission was legendary.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, hey everyone, this has been the only podcast
the legendary podcast, the only podcast about movies. Wait for it, Dairy.
First man. Did that work for everybody? Did that cacophony of errors do it for you, listeners? Jesus Christ.
Hey. Well, if we're going to be talking about Lance Armstrong in this episode,
let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
Shahir, when you are not correcting me 9 times about the first man who walked on the moon's name because I'm just a rage fucking monster these days, where can folks find you?
You can find me on my website, Not Flying to the Moon, probably just lounging around playing Spider-Man right now. www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. Matt, when you are confounding the yellow jacket for the space jacket, where can people find you?
Wow. I was trying to deconstruct that in my brain. I still don't quite know what you mean. But if you want to look at me in any type of suits, you can find me at matthuwkrl.com for my life and works. Also, Skeletor, there before PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, you can find me working with the Extra Credits crew doing cool stuff. And this week, I would like to also plug our sister podcast.
Oh, yeah?
Speaking of Carrie, because we had a lovely episode we recorded yesterday. I believe it dropped. By the time this is on Monday, it will be the one that they released Friday. Check it out. It's... listen, I have become a Sex and the City sort of convert. I feel like I unjustly judged that show throughout my youth, and I am now watching it, and despite it having many timely problems, it is still one of the greatest, I think, narratives about friendship that we actually have. So I will plug that. Listen to them. They're hilarious. They're funny. They're insightful. They run, Melissa and Elise, the hosts, run the tour. The Sex and the City bus tour in Manhattan, in New York City.
Say the Tour de France, but
and the Tour de France. There's lots of angles, so check that out. Speaking of Carrie, they're lovely, and they do a great show. And with that, we will leave you for this week, dear listeners. But next week, tune in for another film that we haven't picked yet.
We haven't decided.
We're going to get better. We're going to implement a better request system. We're going to implement a way to let you know what we're seeing so you can prep for it to the best of our ability. Sometimes we mess up with that regard and we have to see different things. But I was actually, Shahir, I just want to talk about this real quick before we go. 185 episodes.
Yeah.
Haven't missed a week.
We in the beginning season we didn't do like every week, but it's
okay.
I think it's
minus 10 for safety.
I think it's been 2 years of like every week, right?
Yeah.
Think about that, people, when you're writing your iTunes reviews from your keyboard, you freaking
no.
warriors.
I just want to say, I think we're talking about hold on. We're talking
look
about
how entitled we sound. Yeah, we've given you an episode every week.
No,
therefore,
hey, I'm tying this back to your beginning thing of feeling worthless. I was making a joke about Neil Armstrong didn't do this thing, and what we're doing is in by no way sort of extraordinary in the difficulty of what we are doing.
Wait, let me just so I can get this straight. You're saying going to the moon and making a weekly podcast
for over 2 years
is not the same thing.
No, they are not the same thing.
Okay, gotcha.
But if all of our experiences can only be judged on our own internal emotional scale, we have done something that a shit ton of people have not done. And I personally, while I cannot be proud of doing something as large as going to the moon, am proud of this podcast and proud of the work that we've done and proud of the conversations we've had with all these people about film. And I think that it actually is, in its own stupid, tiny, minuscule way, kind of important and impressive. So you're not worthless. We're not worthless. And I'm going to go out on that.
You know what I'll go out with?
What?
Stewie from Family Guy going, "You're doing good."
Goddamn right, Stewie. We'll see you next week.
Bye.